You're listening to the Yeshiva of Newark at IDT podcast. I'm your host and curator, Rabbi Avraham Kivlevitz, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Hi, this is the Projectionist Semicha, and this is the second part of our conversation. Yitzchak, Kolakowski, myself, and Thom Shubilla. And in this part of the program, we're going to be talking, you'll hear us, talking about not only Batman and the Green Hornet and why the Green Hornet did not make it as long as Batman did, but from there we actually get into a whole range of discussion about which programs, again, suffered. We are talking about colorization of films, and there's a discussion about Dick Van Dyke, Eve Arden, and some of the other persons who were great in some programs in television weren't able necessarily to ever be brought back and were stuck in a certain sense in a certain role. I think it's a little more serious than part one in some ways, but still a lot of good fun. So here's part two. I hope you enjoy it. Now, the superhero shows.
Yeah.
Now, there were two shows that I knew, even as a 5-year-old, were clones of each other. One was on CBS, and the other was on NBC. And one was at 6:30, or one was at, I guess, Primetime, I think, started at 7. One was at 7 to 7:30, and one was 7:30 to 8. And the shows were, and I can sing their theme songs because I still remember them. One was
I'd be very disappointed if you couldn't.
Okay, so I'm going to sing a little bit of them. One was Captain Nice, which had the actor from St. Elsewhere, you know I'm talking about, William Daniels. Daniels. And the other was called Mr. Terrific.
Yes.
Right? He takes that certain power pill, right? And then, right? Or, that's no nut, son. That's Captain Nice, right? The kid says, who is that nut who's running around in pajamas? No, that's no nut, son. That's Captain Nice. Now, those shows, Mr. Terrific and Captain Nice, was that year too, 66, 67?
Yeah. They both debuted in January of 67.
To sort of
replacements.
They figured they would jump on the Batman bandwagon.
Yes. And so both were mid-season replacements. Both, aired a station off from one another and a time slot off.
I remember. Because I remember I would turn, because I was able to turn the television. Oh, I can watch Mr. Terrific and then Captain Nice. Mr. Terrific on CBS and Captain Nice on NBC.
Yes. So they were a dial turn away and a time slot away. And both their fates were pretty much the same. I actually have them as the same chapter, or the same sub-chapter, I guess, because they're so linked. Even though they're different shows, different networks, they came on the same day. They were canceled around the same time. The last show aired when it was the same day.
Right.
What
do you think? What do you think that indicates?
That people, when I talk to people about the show, people will misremember the titles. So they'll say, "Oh, it was Mr. Nice."
No.
Captain Terrific. Like, oh no. You have it the opposite way.
Right.
And so these two shows were just so linked. It was incredible that they just suffered the same fate they had.
Right,
and
so
their
I'll tell you, the
episodes scored really high. The first couple episodes, scored really high, and although the reviews oftentimes were linked as well. So when both shows were reviewed by critics, they were connected. They were like, okay, hey, we like Captain Terrific, we like Mr. Terrific, but Captain Nice is a little better, So
Right.
They were linked in reviews.
Let me just, for the people who don't know what we're talking about, both of these shows had the idea that you have sort of like a bozo schlepper, a jalub, who becomes a superhero. That was basically the idea of both of them, right? That, and therefore the comedy is the difference between the Clark Kent sort of person and the super person, and the super person, right? And therefore, how is he going to deal with his powers? But it was clearly meant to be played as broad comedy. Like what will happen?
Yeah, both were absolutely comedy,
right? And the reason why I think Batman, Batman lasted 4 seasons or 5 seasons?
3.
Only 3 seasons. Wow.
Only 3 seasons. Yeah.
So,
there always the rumor was that another network was going to pick it up at some point, but that just never happened.
So Batman did not suffer that fate, although it was played for comedy, was because it had a provenance. It had the comic book. It also had ready characters that people knew enough from the comics. In fact, the original, unlike Captain Nice and Mr. Terrific, which I don't think had animation in the beginning, Batman started with the comic book, right? In other words, you'd actually have a comic book coming to life. And I think because of that, they were able to capture a kitsch and a campiness that they were able to sustain. They had a rogues gallery to draw on, and they also, I think people realized, like people like Cesar Romero, Wally Cox, Burgess Meredith, and others, they realized this was a place for them to ham it up. And whereas, who wants to go on with William Daniels as as Mr. Nice, as you made me say it, as Captain Nice. I mean, there was nothing really to draw on other than it was.
You're right. There's not provenance with that. I think you're absolutely right with that.
It's a one-trick pony, and part of it was, I have to tell you, as a comic book reader, many people who love comic books felt that the program destroyed the comic, because the comic, as you know, which became extremely dark, as you know from the Dark Knight and other iterations, the comic, although the 50s had a lot of sort of science fiction parts to the comic, the 60s they really changed the comic. They even introduced Batgirl because they were going to introduce Batgirl in the program. So this program in its 3 years had a very strong effect on the comic book and the people that were buying it. They expected the Joker to be more like the Cesar Romero figure, which was like the crown prince of crime, right? As opposed to, the Joker as he later became, which is, of course, a serious psychopathic killer. Which would happen later. So again, Batman, I guess, didn't really have that. Now, there was one superhero. It wasn't as successful as Batman, but I think, did it last 2 seasons, or did it only last 1 season?
Green Hornet only lasted 1.
Is that so? Right.
Yes. Only last 1 season. Same producer, William Dozer. And one of the problems with the Green Hornet was, again, it was the same producer who said, well, we really need to do something different than Batman. We're going to play this one completely straight, and we're going to make it almost a crime, more of a crime show, a procedural type show.
And part of it was because, of course, the Green Hornet, although there might have been a comic book iteration of it, was basically a radio program, right?
There was a comic, but it was after the radio show,
right? So it was really more of a radio program.
Yes, right. And but it was created by a gentleman, George Trendell, who also created the Lone Ranger. Mm-hmm. And Sergeant Preston of the Yukon.
We're bringing us full circle now.
Yeah. So he created both those things, and he had, a really great track record of stuff in the 50s. So Lone Ranger, anything he put anything that he put the Lone Ranger name on, it sold.
But what is the Green Hornet? He's a fellow who fights crime at night and during the days. What is he?
He's a newspaper magnate, a newspaper editor,
and he wants to fight crime,
right? But he unlike Batman, everybody feels that he's a villain, and he wants everybody to think he's a villain so he could fight crime.
This way he can really get into the underworld.
Right. So the only person that knows that he's not a villain is the DA.
Oh no.
And obviously Kato, the sidekick.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I looked at for the book, which I thought was incredibly interesting. So I looked at the George Trendle archives and the William Dozier archives, and William Dozier, the producer, and the two of them fought tooth and nail over the Green Hornet time and time again in letters back and forth to each other about how the show should be portrayed. William Dozier said, no, you know what? Like, let's have some cool villains. Let's have some, over the top weapons.
Sort of like Batman.
Like more like Batman. And Trendle kept saying, no, it's a police procedural. This show is sold on civics. This show is sold on good citizenship. This show is sold on detectives. Mm-hmm. And so they just never came to an agreement on that. Mm-hmm. And that's really what it came to.
So the show, but it looked like Dozier was right, especially in a crowded sort of area where Batman was supreme.
Mm-hmm.
What could the Green Hornet do? He couldn't be. What could it have done to be successful? I think most people know about the Green Hornet because it was Bruce Lee's role as Kato.
Right.
That was, I guess, it was a breakout for Bruce Lee.
Yes, absolutely. It was really his first role. The other thing that hurt the Green Hornet was its time slot. It came on Friday night.
Friday nights, I remember. I couldn't watch it.
Right. So you couldn't watch it, and for others, it was just a bad time slot. It was Friday night. There's a million other things, and it was meant for
better looking than Adam West, but maybe even like a more chiseled, typical Hollywood lead star. But somehow Adam West, with his paunch, with his delivery, I mean, he was really somehow able, and again, he was able to really hit it out of the park in some weird way. Part of it was I think his line readings. He somehow was able to capture the inanity of what they were doing. Climbing up the side of the wall. That's enough, citizen. Jerry Lewis would stick his head out and say, "Lady, lady," right? Or Sammy Davis Jr. would pop out. Somehow Van Williams, it was like you say, there was nothing. He was just too stolid. There was, of course, the crossover Green Hornet Batman.
There was the one episode, and and in that episode they didn't even put a good villain. It was Colonel Gum, who was trying to counterfeit valuable stamps. Like put him against the Riddler, the Joker, Catwoman, do something. But a very forgettable villain, a villain that nobody's ever seen before.
Yes. Yeah. This was definitely the wrong way. In other words,
both Bruce Wayne and Britt Reed were after the woman Pinky Pinkston in that episode.
Look, the purpose of the crossover was to save the Green Hornet.
Yeah.
The purpose of it was a way to save it. They figured if they bring Batman in, maybe people will see there's something significant. But unfortunately, and I think that's what a lot of these crossover programs try to do. If they ever do, if they're successful in it. Look, we could go on for hours here, Tom. And I think that we've shown that 66, 67 was crucial. And do you think it really, paved the way for For what? What do you think it established?
Well, obviously, it's that first season that everything, it established that, okay, every show from now on is going to be in color. Everything in Primetime was still color. I think the next season shows like Dark Shadows, that switched to color on daytime, and soap operas and things like that slowly switched over. And really from that point, I think my math is correct. It was approximately every year forward, another 9% of the population bought a color TV. And so that in itself, I think is kind of interesting, that that really spurred more people to buy a color TV. I think by 1972, it flipped, that more people had a color TV than a black and white TV. So that certainly.
But as we said before, there was people even in the 70s that were bemoaning the quality of the programming, yeah. And they would be talking about the golden age of television of the 50s, of Playhouse 90, and all the programs, even programs that were not Playhouse 90, programs like The Untouchables and some of the other late 50s, early 60s, The Twilight Zone never obviously made it towards that. Yitzchak, we've talked about
Alfred Hitchcock Presents was
all right. So it seems like something was lost. As much as you've celebrated it, I think, yeah. Tom, there's probably been aspects that have been lost. Certain
of black and white. I obviously love a lot of black and white TV shows. I love a lot of. I can't imagine. Well, I could imagine the Munsters going to color, but the Addams Family, I think, would be completely lost in color. I think Dick Van Dyke would be completely lost in color. There's a lot of shows that if they ever made that switch over, something would be lost. And
of course, many people will say that sitcom was the king of sitcoms. It really, in a way, it maybe didn't have the character development of the Mary Tyler Moore Show that was later, but the idea of a realistic program that dealt with real issues but can do it in a comedic way. Also, shifting between the two basic places, the room where they were writing the episodes and Rob and Laura's house, that really set the tone for a lot of very important sitcoms.
But back to when I mentioned Armis Brooks on radio did the same thing, but then when it moved to television, it really lost that.
I'm saying Dick Van Dyke was successful in being able to, they could parse an episode and put half of it, as Buddy and Sally and Rob writing some shtick, and they can then do the other half, Rob and Laura at home, and they were able to really make that work. But it's interesting that Dick Van Dyke himself, has he ever done anything that matches or even comes close to the Dick Van Dyke Show in your mind, Tom?
No. Dick Van Dyke is absolutely the pinnacle of Dick Van Dyke, and I really like Dick Van Dyke as an actor. He was in some really great stuff, but that certainly was the pinnacle. They struck gold with that.
It's sad because they tried to recycle him in the late 60s or early 70s, a Dick Van Dyke Show. He did a show with Hope Lang, I think. It was set in Phoenix. See, I know stuff you don't know. Yeah, there was a Dick Van. It was in the early 70s. It was called The New Dick Van Dyke Show.
Oh, okay, yeah, The New Dick Van Dyke Show. And what was the Diagnosis Murder?
Right, so Diagnosis Murder. The New Dick Van Dyke Show lasted a season and was canceled. But Diagnosis Murder had a history in syndication for sure, right? I think it was.
Yeah, that lasted a long time.
Right, but again, he's slumming there because he knows he can't do any of the physical. I mean, Dick Van Dyke is such a gifted physical comic. As he got older, he wasn't able to do that stuff anymore.
No.
And
the Dick Van Dyke Show, and like I said, I'm glad that it ended when it ended. It would not be the same in color, and it went out on top.
right? Which is you talked about shows being canceled. The Mary Tyler Moore Show, Carol Burnett herself also decided to leave. I don't know if her ratings were down, but I think shows that leave on top.
Yeah, Seinfeld, Jerry Seinfeld almost lost it when Larry King said, "Oh, when your show got canceled," he's like, "Is that what you think happened? You think I got canceled? What?" He really got upset.
Right, and I, especially for people like yourself, Thom, who want to see an ending, right? They will, right? They don't, right? The Fugitive, which was canceled, but they were able to do they were able before the last program to finally catch the one-armed man, right?
Yes,
so
yes, they were given some time to finally catch up.
Yeah, but it's sad that people, again, like you say, Dick Van Dyke had he replaced, I think he replaced Harvey Korman on the last season of the Carol Burnett Show.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And they in the mid-season,
it's forgettable.
And in mid-season, they couldn't work together anymore. And it's not because he and Carol didn't get along. People could not. For some reason, he could not do anything else in the same way. And you're right. He made
even why they had to have that Mary Richards was not divorced. They originally wanted her to be divorced, and they were afraid that people would think that she was divorced from Dick Van Dyke. So they had to make it clear that it was a broken engagement, because they didn't want the viewers to think that Rob and Laura got divorced.
Well, I think one of the best episodes in the Mary Tyler Moore Show. That's true. Most of the Yitzchak, I think it was more the fact that the executives were not ready in 1970 or 69 or 70 or 7 when that season came out. 70, I think it was. They weren't ready to have a star who was divorced. It was sort of like there was still a stigma attached to it. But one of the best Mary Tyler Moore episodes was when Jerry Van Dyke came on the show as a failed stand-up comedian that has quite a little bit of a romantic chemistry between her and and there's even a crying scene that's very similar to the way Mary Tyler Moore would cry as Laura. It's interesting. I saw a documentary. I really recommend it. It's about the life of Rose Marie. Have you ever seen it?
Yes. Yeah. I thought it aired on I think MeTV the one time. It was excellent.
Yeah. Again, I knew who Rose Marie was because I grew up watching the Van Dyke Show, but I had no idea of the richness of her career, of baby Rose Marie and everything that she did.
And up until and working till the end too. So
and that documentary has her husband, who was a trumpet player, I think, a band leader, trumpet player. After he died, she always wore that black ribbon in her hair consistently as a sign of Avelis. Even on Hollywood squares, she would always wear that black ribbon as for her husband. But that documentary brought out that she thought she was going to be the main female character in that show. She thought it was just an adjunct, Mary Tyler Moore. I think Mary Tyler Moore was in the show Peter Gunn. I think she was the secretary, the legs of the secretary. I think so. Right? You never saw her face, but and so she was not really a major star at all. And that show really
the theory that she appeared in one Three Stooges short with Joe Besser. They talked about it in the Three Stooges magazine, that there's one scene they're debating whether or not it was her as one of the extras.
Who Mary Tyler Moore?
Mary Tyler Moore. That was her first screen role was
really
was a Joe Besser Three Stooges short.
That's not a very good intro then.
But the point,
I like Joe Besser. I don't know. I know everybody.
The point being, though, is that again, it turned her into a star. I mean, the Dick Van Dyke Show. I mean, her comedic chops were tremendous in that role,
and dramatic. It was authentic. It was the perfect blend.
Right, man. Yeah, really great stuff. One of the things that I think she learned from Dick Van Dyke was, to be gracious, because obviously the Mary Tyler Moore Show gave everybody a star turn. Not always the same thing with Dick Van Dyke. I mean, there was, you didn't see, Richard DeCon never got much of a program. I think maybe there's one show where he's featured where Alan wants to fire him. But I think it's generally Richard DeCon. Also, really a guy, who made it, as a character actor. He's actually in one of Hitchcock's films. I think he's in Marnie, but
he's also in them.
He's also in them. I want to talk about one last program, Tom. We talked about Armis Brooks, and obviously Armis Brooks has at its heart an extremely talented actress. I mean, who could really act the pants off Lucille Ball. That's that's Eve Arden. Eve Arden is an incredible actress. She, even though Lucy was might have been in more films, Eve Arden really, she was a tough talking, attractive, real Hollywood broad. For some reason, because she was good friends with Lucy, Desilu Productions created
I said Bewitched. Even Bewitched was not the same in color. It was just.
Right.
It was a classy. It was a classic sitcom. It almost looked like, Leave It to Beaver. That type. And then when it got color, it got two 1960s. If that makes sense.
Right. I think part of it. You have to say that part of it was. I think although Dick York was still there, 66, 67. But when Dick Sargent took over the role, I think the Bewitched really took a tremendous nosedive.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the other Darren, this was one of the weirdest things that, a successful sitcom ever did, was basically change a major character, and nobody says anything. They should have at least have Andorra turn him into something.
Yeah, turn him into a different guy.
Right. They could have had Dick York come in at least for one program and have Andorra curse him and turn him into somebody else or something like that. But
certainly color. I mean, it's something that
I think it emphasizes. If you don't mind, I think it emphasizes, Tom, the fantastic and the gimmick, whereas Black and White focuses on the face. It focuses a lot on shades of color. We know that, Orson Welles told Bogdanovich that he should definitely film The Last Picture Show in black and white, Paper Moon in black and white. There is something about mood setting, and you talked about it when you talked to me about the film noir films that you taught in your seminar in college. There is something about black and white, especially on a small screen, Tom, that, not the 55-inch, or 60 inches or a full scale that we have today, that somehow it was almost like, this is weird. Like, it's in color, but it's only like 14 inches. Yeah. A black and white episode could it fit about that. And part of it,
that's night and day.
Right, 100% different. Part of it was because, and again, this is my bread and butter a little bit, Rod Serling. One of the reasons was that Serling did not have complete creative control over Night Gallery. Night Gallery, although there were some episodes that he wrote, he did not direct or write. He didn't direct at all, but he didn't write the same amount of proportion of episodes that he did there. Basically, what NBC wanted was an hour program, which, again, remember when Twilight Zone was an hour, that was the season that got canceled. Yeah. Right? Part of what made Twilight...
Anytime those shows, the hour ones, come on, I think, I'm not going to watch this one.
Right. Listen, definitely someone like you and Yitzchak, who were, millennials, sort of, I guess, or Generation X, whatever you want to call yourself. It's hard for you guys to watch a program that lasts an hour, right? And
I can watch a program that's an hour, but Twilight Zone an hour just never did it for me.
No, because part of it is, it's supposed to be boom, a sock to the solar plexus, right?
Yeah.
That's the whole point. No, right? It can't really survive if it's if it's drawn out to an hour. It's got to, it's a little morality play, a vignette of morality play. And part of the problem with Night Gallery was they weren't sure what to do with it.
No.
And the shtick, the framing device was also weird. Here's Rod Serling walking in this spooky sort of museum, and then there would be some painting that would somehow be the reflection of what the story was. It clearly suffered a lot. Color should stay color, and black and white should stay black and white. And the colorization of films, that was, I guess, Ted Turner started doing it, right?
Yeah, Ted Turner, started it, and like we did talk about, and I don't know if the story is true, but we'll say it's true. One of Orson Welles' dying wishes or dying things were, tell Ted Turner to keep his crayons off my films.
Right.
So,
which indicates to you that there is something about artistic, I guess, if not significance, but at least don't violate what the artist has done.
And when I was thinking about it, I was thinking about, Ted Turner owns the film. He could colorize it, but if I own a painting, does that give me right to do something different to it?
Well, again, this really gets into the nature of art. And, we talked about this, that even though art was always developed, I mean, Da Vinci and Michelangelo, they worked for money, right? And there were patrons, Rembrandt, they painted for other people, but yet we somehow, or even composers who composed for the sake of some duchess or to get paid, once something is recognized as being so beautiful and significant, it really detaches itself from those type of business-like considerations. Yeah. You would, and especially since even the person that owns the painting has what we believe is a moral artistic responsibility to preserve it when it's something of such great beauty and such significance. And even if it's not beautiful, it's at least, as I mentioned to you yesterday, a way to look into the past and see what the world was like. I mean, if we decided, because there's not enough inclusivity in Bewitched, that we were going to now, insert people of different ethnicities, right? It wouldn't be just it wouldn't be just Greg Morris showing up on the Dick Van Dyke Show, right? And it got the biggest laugh, I think, in the history of the show, right? But that's the type of tinkering that we can't allow.
That's what's going on now.
When I was looking some things up on this today, actually, and there was an episode of In Living Color, the sketch comedy show in the early 90s, where Jim Carrey played Ted Turner on the sketch. And they said, we're going to colorize Casablanca, but they included Billy D. Williams as the main character. So, they're like, we're going to do it a different way. And I thought, wow, okay, this is kind of bringing it full circle to what we talked about in what are we going to do with film.
Yitzhak, I know you feel strongly about this. Yitzhak, why don't you chime in?
They're talking about making a black Superman, all these different characters, and yet, if it was an actual authentic black story instead of just making a white character black, that would be really celebrating that culture. I mean.
I heard one of your kids saying Disney films. One of the films he was most proud of is a film that I saw because it was re-released in the theaters in about 1968 or 69, Song of the South.
Right, which is bad, but Son of Ghoul has some copies. If you want a bootleg come to Monster Bash and
okay,
get a bootleg copy of it.
But this is one of the things. Colorization is a way to make these old films more appealing, and that's the reason why, whether it's A Wonderful Life or some of the other classics, the idea was that children and young adults who weren't used to seeing films in black and white will reject these films, won't watch them, and in this way this is like a candy that we can at least bring people back to see the film. That's why Turner and his minions thought they were doing these films a favor. But people like Scorsese and Spielberg and others stood in the breach and said, we won't allow it because this is detracting from the original ideal of what the artist had. So
when Turner colorized the movies, it looked like crayons. It looked silly. Now the colorization process has advanced so much. I know Harryhausen gave permission to colorize his black and white movies that were done for Columbia because he wanted to make them in color. He just didn't have the money to do it. And the quality of the technology has improved quite a lot. I still would rather watch it in black and white.
And I don't know if you feel the same way. Did you ever see the Turner colorized King Kong?
Yeah, I hate it. It's all
really. I'm the exact opposite. I'd much rather watch it in black and white, obviously, but I think it's kind of interesting. It's kind of sepia toned, and it looks like if they colorized it that day, if they colorized it in 1933, what it would look like. If they colorized it now,
second color, then yeah, you're right.
It would be a little too crisp.
Mm-hmm.
Like
I hear
the
what you're
colorization of Plan 9 from Outer Space. It just looks a little too nice. I don't know how to describe it. And then a film that and I had never heard of it until I saw it for sale at Monster Bash, and I started doing a little bit of research on it today. It was the Italian version of Godzilla. And it came out in 1977. It was a recut of the original Godzilla, and it was in something called Spectrorama 70, which was just these cheap gels over the film. And they added a couple more scenes, and there was some weird, kind of synth music and things like that. But it's almost called like the psychedelic Godzilla. And this is like where the opposite end of the spectrum, where it's done so poorly you have to watch it.
It's the train wreck that you have to
it absolutely is.
If it's true that the integrity of the artist means something, and if it's true that a work of art is bigger than the time it was made because it represents a way to go back, a way to reflect, a way to see, it's a time machine, and it tells us so much more than a book or a speech or a lecture, then films that even have objectionable imagery, films that have African-American actors portrayed in a way that is undignified, that is Stephen Fetchit-like, or Jewish characters played over the top with accents and ridiculous, what we call stereotypical tropes, they should be left alone. And this is what I think. What do you guys think?
Yeah, that's how we preserve history. That's how we know. We can't whitewash history. We can't forget the past.
But I really see the same way you had that. What was it in the Muppets? That was on Disney Plus. That they had a disclaimer,
right, about
how
even if there was smoking or anything else,
like, or even if there was some sort of German character, like the ultra. A sensitivity to any sort of ethnic slur or any sort of thing that's not politically correct. I'm not saying that we should produce politically incorrect films, but we should have a history of political incorrectness and know what it was. And let me say it even better.
Well, I mean, there is a place for the political incorrectness, though, because it brings out. Sometimes the satire is there, Blazing Saddles. It's a movie that rejects racism, shows how ridiculous racism is, but you could not get away with making that movie today.
That's right. That's right. The old lady would not be able to say the N-word to a black man today. And yet, one could argue, and I think it's true, that it might be the most successful thing that Mel Brooks ever did, including Get Smart and including Young Frankenstein. Oh, it's Mel Brooks' birthday today?
Yeah, he's 96 years old tonight.
Wow.
I know him. Look, Mel Brooks is definitely needs to be, but I think you'll agree with me. As great as the producers is wonderful to watch. It's funny, and obviously it has an afterlife later. The 12 Chairs, okay. Get Smart. Again, we could talk about Get Smart going into color too, Tom. But
Get Smart only had the black and white pilot episode.
Television shows that we're going to wince in pain and talk about. Again, there's even programs where you're going to, which I'm sure people at the forefront of the Me Too movement look back at and say, look how they were, objectifying women. Look at the way, a woman would come onto a game show and Gary Moore would say, wow, you're really pretty. Like, you're right. That was normal.
Dawson making out with them pretty much.
Yeah, I was going to say before, I wish Dawson would have retired after Hogan's Heroes. His run on Family Feud was quite something. But you're right. The fact that, and it was accepted that everybody was going to get a kiss from Richard Dawson, right?
Wasn't a kid. I mean, he was mauling them. I mean,
yes. The point though is that we shouldn't necessarily have some political correct person or woke person or anybody lecture us and say, we have here some old episodes of Family Feud. We know that what Richard Dawson's behavior is uncouth, untoward, and we do not condone it in any way, but it is a remnant of that time. Do we need those type of Surgeon General statements on films and old television shows? What do you think?
I don't think so. No, I think that's taking it too far. I mean,
way in the United States. And looking at these films allows us to see that. It allows us, but even to enjoy those films, to enjoy those films and laugh and cry at the same time at those Jewish stereotypes, even at some of the Stefan Fetchit stuff. Again, but what I see coming is the banning of those programs. And the streaming services, let me explain why I think they're going to be banned. Once only certain programs are available in streaming services, and you have to be, like you, Tom, a researcher extraordinaire to find them, they pretty much don't exist.
Yeah, when you no longer have it on a physical media, it becomes much easier to look at it and say, okay, we are going to eliminate this episode. We're going to eliminate this. We are going to take this out of the show. Again, when you do step away from kind of a physical media, which, for the last 35, 40 years, we have the luxury of.
I mean, even more recent shows that they couldn't show the Homer Simpson going up and down the World Trade Center, the Twin Towers, because it was too painful, and they had to, or a lot of the Spider-Man movies, they took out any images of the Twin Towers, and like how is that? What I understand, maybe right away when it happened, there needed to be some time, but like
Spider-Man, the original trailer had the Twin Towers, and I understand. Okay, yeah, maybe we shouldn't use this in the trailer anymore, but
not in 2001, but maybe now in 2022. It's we need to remember we can't totally forget that the Twin Towers existed.
Right.
It's
Speaking about that era, we know that before the Twin Towers were bombed, I don't remember the names of the films, but there was a number of films, I think Delta Force and others, where even in Back to the Future, where the criminals are the Arabs, the Libyans, the Arabs, right? The Muslims, the terrorists. Those things aren't happening today either, right? And again, so the scissors could come out on those as well. The Nazis will always be the Nazis, right? Yeah. The Nazis will always be able to hate the Nazis.
What was the remake of Red Dawn? I think originally it was supposed to be the Chinese, maybe, and then they were like, oh no, it's the North Koreans. And then the new Top Gun movie, they never mentioned what country they were going into. It was just this ethnically, geographically vague country.
A part of it, of course, Tom, is they want to make money in those countries by selling the films there. And part of it is being politically correct. And it's what I see, again, I don't want to be a Cassandra doomsayer, but what I see happening is the films that do have, and I'm not saying that these aren't objectionable. Like even, I would tell you, even one of the greatest films of the 1960s, which is The Apartment. I don't know if you've seen that film with Billy Wilder. I've recommended it. The Jewish doctor was in that film. Who was played by Jack Crusher, who had an Academy Award nomination, has all the typical Jewish stereotypical statements, the way he says it, and of course he has the famous line, "Be a mensch," which really becomes a motif of the film. There's something about seeing those laughable, in some way objectionable figures, and recognizing that's where we were, and right. where we are now is a different place.
Yeah, certainly, film and TV definitely shows that, and
I think the more people, even though there's a plethora of stations of streaming services, I think that it's getting harder for the average person to get a hold of the type of programs that you highlighted in your book.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
obviously less and less are on television as well. Just a sign of kind of not progression, but just taste. Whereas Nick at Night or whatever, when I was growing up, showed stuff from the 50s and 60s. Now it's 90s and 2000s.
Right. So that stuff, unfortunately, is sort of like heading into an oblivion that we're going to have a hard time recovering. And you can catch it on various streaming services. To me, it's a very painful show to watch. I don't know if I guess you haven't seen too many episodes of it, have you?
No, I've not.
Yes, it was and Richard DeCon took the place of a great character actor. They replaced the. But it's sort of it was in color, all the episodes, and it's unfortunate.
The Mothers-in-Law.
Oh, is that what it's called? The Mothers-in-Law?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's another example of having you have Eve Arden. She's too old. You don't want to just Kay Ballard is in it as well. Who else do you have over there, Yitzchak, who was in it?
Eve Hubbard, Kay Buell, Herbert Rudley, Herb Hubbard, Jerry Fogel. It was Deborah Wally. A big cast. Richard Deacon, like you said.
Right.
But 2 seasons, 56 episodes.
Wow.
They're doing about 30 episodes a season.
Right. It came out in 1967, actually.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it really is it's sort of Roger Buell, who died. I think who was it? Who was the actor who played Roger Buell? For a second.
This is Roger Carmel.
What's his name? Roger Carmel. Right. Yeah. So he died after the first season, and they replaced him with Richard DeCon. So this was really an interesting. They tried to sort of like capture a little bit of the I Love Lucy dynamic of and it's sort of has similarities to Everyone Loves Raymond. Eve Arden doing a lot of physical comedy, her and Kay Ballard dressing up like Lucy and Ethel and getting involved in all these different types of things. It really, I think, is an example again of you have a star, and television just can't do it for them. You don't know what to do with them. So it's a Jerry. I was just listening on a podcast recently. Jerry Stiller, had a show as well. I think called Joe and Sons in '72 or something. It was canceled after 6 episodes, and boy, did he have a great afterlife, didn't he? I'm saying
Seinfeld, absolutely.
Yeah, Jerry Stiller, he was able to be so over the top and so perfect. I don't know if Ann Mira, his wife, fared as well, but Jerry Stiller, again, a sample of people who are able to salvage something, in this great of Quantum Leap. Paid the time tunnel a lot of money. It's exactly the same show almost, right? Yeah. The only difference was let's Scott Bakula was able to, the shtick of it was he becomes a character in that, he takes on the he's either a woman or a black guy or someone in that, but the idea, it was definitely a time tunnel ripoff in a certain way. Well, Thom, this has been a time tunnel for me. I've definitely been able. I feel like I don't know who were the 2 actors there. It was sort of like a swirling wheel that you would run into and somehow escape into some other era. And you've allowed Yitzchak and I to escape into a lot of different eras. I wish you a lot of luck in your teaching, and your passion is palpable. And I appreciate you staying up late with us.
Anytime. I'd love to do it again.
Okay. All right. That's about it, my friends. Watch your step on the way out. Thanks for joining us for another episode from the Yeshiva of Newark at IDT Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss a single episode.